The Flash is the latest film from the DC universe, I think is how we're referring to it now. Look, going into this, we have a lot of housekeeping items. First off, Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller is one of the worst people that has ever existed on this earth. And I don't feel bad saying that. I feel like that's a pretty objective statement at this point. They have just caused a world of pain for so many people, and so there was a lot of controversy going into this film, whether or not they would even release it. And so I just want to acknowledge that, because I think there's a lot of people who are hesitant to see this film because they don't want to support them. And for those people, that is fine. You do not have to support this film if you feel like it's going to support this individual. Obviously, I did see this film, so that was a personal decision I had to make. I think everyone needs to make that decision, but at least be aware of what you are potentially supporting by going to see this film. The other thing I want to address before even getting to the review is the hype that this film has received, specifically from notable people like James Gunn, the leader now of all the DC movies, Stephen King, who is one of the best storytellers in the past century, and Tom Cruise, one of, if not the greatest current movie star. These were three people who praised this film, claiming it was one of the best superhero films they have ever seen. That is a lot of praise to be coming from three people who I usually would take their opinion seriously. But I gotta report back and say that this is not one of the greatest superhero films ever made. That being said, this film is still very enjoyable. I would just tamper your expectations a little bit so you're not expecting this. It's going to be really hard to talk about this movie without spoilers because there are so many things about this movie that are spoilery. And I would even encourage you to avoid the internet as much as possible because, unfortunately to me, there were a lot of cool things spoiled that I think I would have enjoyed a lot more having seen it for the first time in the theater. But I am going to talk about what is in the trailer for this film. So if you haven't seen the trailer, don't want to know, just turn this video off. What we do know from the trailer is that the Flash does figure a way to go back in time, go to different realities, a multiverse, and we see other popular DC characters pop up, like Michael Keaton's Batman, which was very much marketed to sell this movie. We also see another version of Flash, and Supergirl makes an appearance. So those are kind of like the main characters that we know for the plot of this film. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there is so much more within this that isn't marketed in the trailers. Cameo after cameo, some that honestly make me feel a little icky, which make me feel icky for reasons that I can't say without spoiling. I can say that not all of them worked for me, and you can tell that a lot of them were just shoved in for fan reactions in the theater. Which worked because my theater was reacting very strongly to these Easter eggs. If I had to really summarize my thoughts on this film, I think most of it actually worked really well for me. I had a great time. A lot of the action scenes were pretty cool. The story is really compelling and heartfelt in a way we don't often see anymore within superhero films. But I think where this film lost me was once we got to the third act, and then things kind of really go off the rail. A lot of issues with the CG, plot issues that if you think about it for more than 30 seconds, you're gonna poke holes in. And like I already said, way too many cameos. It does the classic superhero thing where we're having a good time, having a good story, and this film is only concerned about selling the next film in the series. The reason, though, I think it didn't bother me too much is because that's kind of what I expect with all these superhero films at this point. I know there's going to be references to future projects. I know they're selling me a product. So if you're able to just turn your brain off to all that clunkiness, you might have a good time with this one. When I say there were good action scenes, I mean some of the best action scenes I've seen in DC movies. And I know the bar isn't very high for that statement, but it still stands. The opening specifically, when we get kind of our villain of the week intro to Flash as a character, I think the whole first 10 minutes is brilliantly done. And there's a lot of cool effects that we get to see with Flash running fast, saving people. Ben Affleck's Batman is there, a lot of it. And I will say, Batman in this sequence does one of the coolest things I think Ben Affleck's Batman has ever done in any of his films. But there's this really cool shot of Flash as we kind of see him run fast for the first time in this film. And it's tracking behind him almost as third person. And it almost looks like a time lapse, just running from city to city, through mountains, through fields. It's a really cool way to illustrate how fast he's actually running. And I don't know if we've seen it done this well before. A lot of people already on the internet are complaining about the CG. And I will agree it's not great. I think, though, I'm a little numb to it at this point. Like, I can't remember the last time I saw great CG in a superhero film. And so this one is at least passable. The colors aren't really pretty to look at, and it does look a little messy. And I think if there was a little bit more vision to it, it could have been cleaned up a little bit. But I think the choreography within the fight scenes, Michael Keaton's Batman especially does some really cool things. It passes. It's fine. I also really like the way they visualized him running through different multiverses. It's weird that we're in a place in culture where we can compare different multiverses between franchises, but I appreciate how this one has a different way to visualize what that looks like. It makes it really easy for you as the audience to kind of see what is happening and to follow along where he's going. So while it's cool that we have different multiverses and different franchises, I also think it's getting a little hard for we as the audience to keep up with it. Part of it comes from all these Easter eggs and cameos that we see in this film, because there are some references that you will not understand as the average moviegoer unless you do nothing but spend time on the internet like some of us weirdos do. But even within the multiverse, I think the film thinks that this is something that audiences can just grasp onto and doesn't need further explanation, but I do think it will be confusing for a lot of people just trying to keep up with what is actually happening. Full transparency, the end of this movie, I really don't understand at all. And granted, I just got out of it and haven't taken time to research kind of like what it all meant. But we used to be at a point where that wasn't necessary to enjoy a film. What I had to do to reach maximal enjoyment of this film was to just turn my brain off and let it happen. And I did, and it worked, and I enjoyed it. But this is the type of movie where you're enjoying your time sitting there in the theater, but once you walk out and think about the plot at all, it all unravels, and I'm not sure a lot of it makes sense. So if you're someone who likes to find the plot holes in movies like this, I'm sure this one's full of it. But what I really think worked the best was that heartfelt characterization of Flash. I think it's unfortunate that he really hasn't had an origin movie until this point, and we've seen multiple iterations of the Justice League before this one. And I think what this film does, as far as an origin story, is kind of cool, because it kind of takes this other version of Flash that we see in another multiverse. There's a younger Flash, and the older Flash kind of gets to mentor him, and so we see the origin story take place in a different version of Flash. It's pretty effective. It's a good way to get around the fact that we just kind of skipped over our Flash's origin story. But everything about him as a person being the Flash and being just a human, a son whose mother was murdered and his dad is now on trial for that murder, it all works very well. And it's something I really missed within these films, because I think we are so deep into the superhero genre that these aren't actual people anymore. They don't have real life issues, and the Flash in this film has real life issues. If you watched my review last week of Transformers Rise of the Beast, you'll remember that. I don't really like when end battle scenes end in just this nothing gray zone, and this film definitely does that. We're just in the middle of nowhere, and I think what I miss about old superhero films is that there were innocent bystanders, and it kind of gave the superheroes a little bit more stakes and had us, the audience, be able to follow those stakes a little bit. And while this film does end a mess, the first two acts really do go to show that there are real people that these superheroes need to save. No exaggeration, we get to see the Flash save like a dozen babies. And while babies are a really cheap way to get the audience on the side of the superhero, it's effective, and you are on the edge of your seat hoping that he saves the day. And so yes, I had a good time in this film. Is it perfect? No. Is it great? No. Is it the best superhero film of this year? Absolutely not. Is it one of the better films that takes place in the DC universe? Yes. So that's The Flash. Have you seen it? What do you think? Comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you next time.